Well, here we are. After 9 months of speculation, predictions, optimism, pessimism, and everything in between, Ninja Gaiden 4 is finally here. And there's a lot to talk about. Is this game similar to past entries? How did the new Platinum Games mechanics mesh with the past mechanics? How's the story? Was Ryu screwed over? Is this game fun to play? Did any of my predictions or concerns come to pass? Was I right? Well, stay tuned because you're going to get answers to all of these questions and so much more throughout the video. A couple of disclaimers before we begin. My thoughts come from my initial playthrough of the game, which was a mix of normal and hard, where I didn't 100% complete the game, but I did finish the campaign. I also played some of the ninja trials and chapter challenges, so my opinions here are subject to change as I learn more about the game through further playthroughs. And while I will discuss many topics throughout the video, I won't do a deep dive into everything because some stuff needs its own dedicated video. This critique is coming from someone who has worked in quality assurance for many years, so I naturally notice stuff that many might not have or care about. Unlike many of you, I don't have experience playing other action games similar to Ninja Gaiden. I'm talking about games like Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, and so forth. The only Platinum's game that I've played is Nier Automata, and I haven't played a Souls game. My knowledge of those things comes secondhand from reading and watching other people's experience in those departments. My knowledge of those things comes secondhand from reading and watching other people's experience in those departments. Here are all the topics I will be discussing in this video and their respective timestamps. There will be some spoilers in this video, so don't watch it if you want to experience the game for yourself. And with that out of the way, let's get started. Let's start this by answering a key question that many returning fans have. Which past Ninja Gaiden game does this one play like the most? Now, I've heard the perspective that says you shouldn't go into these games with that mentality because each one plays differently, but I disagree since they all share common features even on a surface level, so knowing which game it plays like will help you better prepare for going into this one. So with that in mind, in my opinion, Ninja Gaiden 4 plays mostly like Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge. Enemies are just as tanky and you have to break their armor. I think these enemies are even tankier than Ninja Gaiden 3. These enemies will survive some of the most insane combos. To compensate, unless the enemy blocks your attacks, every hit connects, which wasn't the case with 3, which pissed off people. You also have to manipulate your ki/blood bind meter, just like with 3. There's also a rage meter, which builds up during combat and gives you an instant kill option that goes away over time. Obviously, the instant kill option is different, but the meters fill up through similar means. This game also awards the player for using OTs over UTs, which was another change from Ninja Gaiden 3. In fact, enemies can now block UTs, which is another step taken in the right direction to nerf them because of how OP they were in Ninja Gaiden 2. They even brought back Ishigami from Ninja Gaiden 3, who gives you missions in the game along with other characters. While on this topic, the only other returning character is Ayane, which everyone got excited for during the leaks, but back to other stuff from Ninja Gaiden 3 that made it into this game. I'm pretty sure that speed and health is a factor to your final score of the chapter. I know item use will dramatically lower the score, so I feel like this game, while giving you the items back, is encouraging you to not use them if you want a better score at the end of each chapter. Ninja Gaiden 3 has a similar philosophy, except in its case, it got rid of all the weapons and forced the players to heal through other means. Ninja Gaiden 4 also brought back Essence, but only for healing, not Nimpo or money. They even brought back accessories, which was only something in OG Ninja Gaiden. I didn't expect this, and it's a welcome addition. All of these are positive changes. Going back to Ninja Gaiden 3 versus Ninja Gaiden 4, instead of steel on bone, the parry is the counter system that absolutely decimates enemies. Certain smaller mechanics like Assassinate, Flying Falcon, the ability to do on-landing UTs after an Azuna drop, and the slide return. Although, for some stupid reason, they made the slide and dash different buttons, making the mechanic harder to use. You also can't slide under enemies anymore, which ruins a cool utility of that move. It just feels like now it only exists for sliding under things, as opposed to being something useful for combat. Now, of course, you can still use it during combat, it even has a quick cancel, but it doesn't feel the same, and considering how many tools you have at your disposal, it doesn't seem worth it to devote headspace to integrating it for combat. Perfect dodge, normal dashing, block, perfect block, and parry are just better. This isn't the only thing where this game takes a step backwards, and that's with the respawning system. Every death results in this menu that prompts the user to either restart from checkpoint, quit the game, and if applicable, restart the fight or switch difficulties. By comparison, Ninja Gaiden 3 automatically reloads the last checkpoint, and this is probably because that's what a player would select if a menu was given to them 9 times out of 10. If I wanted to quit, I would do it from the menu. The same applies with the other options. I don't see the benefit of this change. If you're going to implement checkpoints over save statues because you don't want the player to have to replay the same things over and over again, why wouldn't you apply that concept to respawning? Also, the checkpoint system was in Ninja Gaiden 3, so they brought that back as well. And sure, maybe that respawn mechanism sucks, but if you enjoyed the enemies trash talking you, or the peanut gallery commenting on your death, or walking and talking segments during the campaign. Can we stop now? Really? More slow walk? Well, I got good news for you. They brought all those things back from Ninja Gaiden 3. Something I could have done without.
Die! Hayabusa! Come on, get up! Hey!
The walking and talking is the most egregious because they removed many of those sections in Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge from vanilla Ninja Gaiden 3 because of the negative feedback. I guess people had better standards back then. They also doubled down on the heartbeat sound effect from Ninja Gaiden 3 to make the screen red when your character is near death. Why would you do this, and why can't I remove this in accessibility options? With respawning, the game should have had an option to not prompt you every single time with the menu, or another option to only give you the menu after a certain amount of deaths have occurred. Ninja Gaiden 3 did that because again it understood that people just want to get back into the game, and this game doesn't seem to quite get that. Also, the item system here, where Tyrant will give you an item if you die too many times, is significantly inferior to Doom Eternal because all you get is a healing item as opposed to something else that would be more useful. On a positive note, playing as Ryu was the best part of my experience with this game, and one of the reasons why is because his moveset comes right out of Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge. They even copied many of his past animations. It was glorious, building up the ki meter to unleash the impulse spells over and over again. All of the muscle memory from Ninja Gaiden 3 easily transferred to this game. Since you don't use the true Dragon Sword in Ninja Gaiden 3, at least in combat, the Gleam stuff comes from Ninja Gaiden 2 and original Ninja Gaiden. Besides that, the other Ninja Gaiden 2 stuff was the on-land UTs because you can absorb essence, which wasn't the case in Ninja Gaiden 3, but you could still do on-landing UTs, but you had to have your blood rage meter filled up to perform it. On a surface level, you can perform all the main moves like Azuna drop, guillotine throw, wind path, UTs, OTs, flying swallow, etc, etc. But the combos for your weapons is a much different system, and we'll talk about that later. Next question, is the game difficult? Yes. Yes, it is. This game combines the aggressive AI behavior, armor, and tankiness of the Ninja Gaiden 3 enemies with the amount of enemies from Ninja Gaiden 2. Just like before, the AI adapts to your behavior. This time, they'll put up armor if you use too many light and heavy attacks, which forces you to use Blood Raven to break the armor. I could be wrong, but I think this time around, the enemies are even more aggressive. Anytime you come out of an iframe move or lengthy combo, the enemies will immediately come in there to attack you. Even on normal difficulty, you will have some issues. It reminds me of my first playthroughs of Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge, where I had to first get used to the mechanics, then it became easy to play through. Ninja Gaiden 4 makes the process of learning the new mechanics much easier than past games thanks to the training mode. You can either practice a single move or do a more free-for-all style for training. In free-for-all mode, you can choose which enemy you face, their behavior, and adjust other stuff. It's simply the best way to learn the main combos and how to counter each enemy type. While the mode is great, it does have some issues. I wish there were more ways to simulate more in real game situations. The red text for the combos can be hard to read at times. They should have copied the interactive move list from Ninja Gaiden 3, where it has the button inputs and the move list in the same area. That interactive move list is also more responsive. It's just easier to learn moves that way. The move list in Ninja Gaiden 4 will change as well, but it doesn't feel as responsive. Because this training mode has the button inputs and the move list in separate spots, it forces the player to have to look in two different places when testing out different combos, which is a huge no-no when designing really good UIs. The highlight system cannot replace the simplistic Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge version of the move list. Also, you can't access this interactive move list during combat like you could with Ninja Gaiden 3. I'm not sure why, if the technology existed over a decade ago, why they couldn't put that feature in this game. Anyways, back to difficulty. You have to play the game once before you unlock Master Ninja mode. I didn't spend a lot of time in hard mode, but it's definitely a nice upgrade from normal if things are getting too easy for you. I haven't gotten through a full run of Master Ninja yet, but just from a small sample, it's quite intense. It doesn't feel as hard as past iterations, but it also doesn't mess around either. I was, however, playing it on New Game Plus as opposed to a fresh game like in previous iterations. I imagine on a fresh game, it's probably insanely difficult, especially because the enemies feel like they deal more damage than in past games. And another reason why a fresh game is harder than before is due to the new upgrade system. Ninja Gaiden 4 copies original Ninja Gaiden and Ninja Gaiden 3 when it comes to purchasing generic moves. Things like Guillotine Throw, Flying Swallow, and even the ability to do an on-landing UT. I like that they included the requirements to purchase a second charge for ultimate techniques. While not as restrictive as Ninja Gaiden 3's system, it's better than nothing. Anyways, because you have to purchase so many key moves, the first few chapters are rough. You even have to wait for a new arc for Tyron to unlock more abilities to you. I'm not a big fan of this, but it's also not a big deal. You kind of just get used to it. Now, I don't like the individual weapon move purchase system. I don't mind that all weapons use the same button inputs for these moves, but the progression doesn't feel as rewarding as upgrading weapons in past games. Doing that gave you more damage and more moves, and the weapon physically changes. Here, none of that happens. It's almost like the weapon comes to you fully upgraded with special moves to unlock. In general, the progression in this game comes from health upgrades and from acquiring each weapon, which unlocks after each arc concludes, since each weapon is tied to a Dark Dragon seal. But that's a bit off topic. The point is, having so many key moves locked behind a paywall does make a fresh Master Ninja and hard mode playthrough rough. From going through other people's experiences in this game, I think the game was intended to be played on New Game Plus. One last thing, Master Ninja locks you from changing the difficulty, which is why I don't mind the feature that allows you to swap difficulties from hero all the way to hard and vice versa. I still think that goes against one of the design philosophies of this IP, but at least we got some kind of compromise with it. So yeah, this game is hard. Get ready to die and die a lot. What about the story? Everyone says it sucks. Well, does it? I have to agree. It does suck. It had potential, but too many things went wrong, whether it was Yakumo being a wasted opportunity, the bad pacing, the predictable writing, which resulted in poor payoffs, the story also being boring didn't help, and worst of all, some of the bullshit Ninja Gaiden 3 problems from its story also snuck their way into this one, particularly with some of the commentary on Ryu and his clan. Even for Ninja Gaiden standards, this one is bad. You get more interesting story stuff from the archive section, which should have been in the game itself. By the way, the archive section is a nice feature that provides interesting info on enemies, the lore, and main characters. I wish this was in past games. My only critique is that I wish it had cool models that the Arkham games used. I would love to view the characters and enemy models using the same interface as photo mode, which that's also a new addition to this game. It's really awesome and everything I ever wanted, except I wish you didn't need a third-party application to take the photos. Tangent over. For those that say, who cares? No one plays these games for the story. Just wait, I will address that in a future video. And what's the deal with the weird zoom-ins on Ayane and Shiori's faces? Another thing I want to address in a separate video is Ryu's treatment in this game. Let's just say I'm not happy with it, but let's start with some positives. Ryu's gameplay is fun. As I said before, it's the best part of this game, and after completing the campaign on any difficulty, it will unlock the additional modes like Ninja Trials and Chapter Challenges. Just like with Ninja Gaiden 3, Razor's Edge, you can play through all of these modes with Ryu. You can even get the Master Ninja achievement through playing the Chapter Challenges with Ryu. So basically, for the Ryu only fans, beat the game once and you never have to use Yakumo again. The Chapter Challenges don't work like in Ninja Gaiden 3, where all the story stuff is cut, so you do experience mostly the same things aside from some exceptions. And while you can't change the story to incorporate Ryu, at least it's more comparable to the story than I expected. But that's not really a good thing, because the whole point of Chapter Challenges is to allow the player to go through the levels without having to go through the story stuff. I don't mind dialogue, but this mode even includes tutorial and other slower parts. I don't know how you mess up something this simple. At least you can select the different arcs as opposed to just going through each levels in the Chapter Challenges menu. I also like it that they give you info on the completion rate, which includes the collectibles and missions. And now for the negatives. Yes, Ryu is still a super ninja, which by the way, the game calling him this is silly, cringe, and too self-referential. Even for Ninja Gaiden. As dumb as Ninja Gaiden 3 got, it never went that far. Continuing on, Ryu's treatment in this story and his weapons pissed me off. One weapon is bad enough, but they also had to remove his bow. You can use the environment and gleam attacks to assist in taking out long-range enemies, but nothing beats out just pulling out the bow to kill them. In fact, besides shurikens and the assassin tools, all the long-range weapons are no longer in this game. They did add bombs too, so I guess that's something. The long-range weapon component has been a staple in past games. Its absence feels wrong. There are many times where if I just had it, those particular fights would have been much easier. They probably didn't include it because of the potential balance issues, but considering how OP Ryu is, would it really been a problem if you could just switch from Ninpo to the bow and then use the same gleam activation mechanic for the Ninpo with the bow? You could even make it require ki to activate so you don't get unlimited shots. Now, one of the imbalances is the Ninpo mechanic. Instead of past games where Ninpo was overpowered but they limited your use of it, here Ninpo is slightly weaker and can be used more frequently, especially with the Phoenix and Piercing Void. I was concerned about this, and those concerns came to pass. Ninja Gaiden 3's system of having significantly different size key meters per Ninpo was a great way to balance this mechanic, but here it's the same size. This time around, they made it that certain Ninpo spells will use less of the meter than others, but the problem is the meter is not that large, so filling it up is not as difficult. And unlike in Ninja Gaiden 3, the key meter will auto-regenerate over time, so it's not too difficult to fill these things up quickly and spam Ninpo. They missed the point of Ninpo and treat it like some stupid mindless spamming power move instead of how it worked in past games. On a positive note, the Phoenix Ninpo spell was buffed and is now a viable option in this game where it wasn't in Ninja Gaiden 2. Next you have Ryu's rushed story chapters, which feel like filler. Even the female characters in Ninja Gaiden 2 Sigma and Razor's Edge were treated better. I was right, by the way. Ryu is the antagonist of this game, something I didn't like. And like everything else we've discussed and will discuss in regards to this game, it's another mixed bag. Let's move on to another weak area in this game, the environments. I think people are over-exaggerating how bad they are. To me, they're just mediocre and only seem to exist to get their job done, to get you from point A to point B while you kill enemies along the way. Here are additional issues that I have with them. Number 1, they overstay their welcome. For perspective, chronologically, you spend 3 missions in Neo Tokyo, then 4 in the Fuhaku Sanctum, then 3 in the Drowned District, then 4 in the DDO base. Then, for the Ryu segments, you go back to Neo Tokyo, Fuhaku Sanctum, and the Drowned District at 1 mission apiece. And finally, 2 more missions at the DDO base to end the game. By comparison, you don't spend more than 2 missions in any location in past games. That's because those games had more variety in their locations. The only exceptions is the last 3 missions in Ninja Gaiden 2 and the waifu missions. But that's not as bad because the waifu missions are non-consecutive and usually have new areas within those same levels to explore. And with Ninja Gaiden 2, it's the end of the game, so why not have 3 back-to-back missions? I don't think that's a problem. Anyways, as a result of this decision, the levels become stale and samey and too repetitive. If you had spent less time at any of those locations, it wouldn't be as bad. I can only justify this if the levels were connected, like in OG Ninja Gaiden, but they aren't. Number 2, these levels just aren't as interesting as past games. Everything feels muted and uninspired. There's only so many large rooms with tall ceilings, interconnected areas with bridges, and these watery things before it starts to get old. Past games had better variety. You would travel from one area in the map to the next, but you didn't get deja vu. The past levels are more creative and would sometimes have you look around and you would notice some interesting stuff in the environment. There was some personality there. Not so much here though. To be fair, there are moments where something interesting exists in the environments, but they aren't present enough, and because the environments are so dark, it's hard to really notice those things. I guess also the dark environments justify the yellow paint and the need for color accessibility options. That feels like using one bad mechanic to justify another. I'm not sure why they couldn't just reference the older areas from past games and build off those. But I guess we can't have nice things. Number 3, because of the issues from number 2, it's easy to get disoriented because combat encounters take forever, so by the time you finish it, it can be sometimes easy to forget where the hell are you and where the hell are you going. This is the first game where that happened to me. I'm so glad they have the sensing the path option, but I was using it way too much for a game that should have more intuitive and simple level design. Number 4, the level designs are impacted because of the rail, gliding, and surfing sections. I don't know the exact breakdown of these mechanics per level, but what I do know is, since the levels will have these sections, they need to be designed in a certain way, specifically larger, so they can accommodate them. That's why you have tall ceilings and large areas of wasted space. Thankfully, this doesn't negatively impact all levels. The Drowned District has more surfing stuff, which doesn't require tall ceilings or interconnected rail/ropes or dedicated wind sections. And that's why I like those areas the most, because it felt like the designers had more room to work with. So in short, these environments should have been better and don't live up to the standards that even Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge had. While we're here, let me discuss the new Traversal stuff. I think they're dumb, but if they weren't so prevalent in the game, I wouldn't be as upset with them. But wow, it was starting to become frustrating with how many times they force you to use this mechanic per each level. Now I'll keep it 100%. I suck at these mechanics unless I'm playing a game dedicated to them like Jet Set Radio Future. So it's not for me. But the bigger problem is the leads lied to everyone. They stated that these mechanics were not designed to get in the way of the combat. They're just supposed to be a nice addition, in their words, like a spice to the game. Well, to continue with the food analogy, for anyone that cooks, too much spice can ruin the dish, and that's what happened here. Having these segments go on for too long and having too much going on in general and having too many of these segments per level does get away in the combat, especially when these things overlap with each other. There was nothing wrong with how past games would handle this. If you just needed a break from combat, just hit the pause button. That's what it's there for. This whole idea that it's supposed to exist so the player's always doing something is absolutely insane. I've never heard one person who plays the original trilogy and says that, I wish there was something to do in between combat sections. People keep saying online they play these games for the combat, so obviously they don't care about the breaks in between stuff. Besides that terrible justification, these segments only seem to exist because it's a Platinum Games title and they've used similar mechanics in the past. The Caddis Wire was an awesome new addition to the franchise. It adds new layers of combat and traversal, and I like the way they lay out the Caddis Wires per each combat encounter. It reminds me of the Doom Eternal layouts. If they had just stopped there, that would have been enough. And they could have focused their efforts into other areas instead of this. We've gone over many shortcomings in this game, and trust me, there's more to come. And all I keep thinking to myself is, man, if they didn't waste time and effort on these bloated filler segments and focus their efforts on other areas, think about how much better this game could have been. Okay, that was a little tense. Let's bring down the temperature a little bit and talk about some positive things. First, let me congratulate Platinum Games here for optimizing their game. Not only does it take up less space than initially advertised, but it works on older hardware if you're playing it on PC. Considering the experience I had with Bleach Rebirth of Souls or the situation with Doom the Dark Ages, this is an amazing achievement. Also, the game didn't crash during my first playthrough. There were some bugs and some stuff needed more testing. For example, Yakumo and enemies will float over chests. This game looks amazing from a graphical standpoint, so the optimization stuff they did was impressive. I know the bar is so low that praising devs for the bare minimum that we expect for games to work on day one is sad, but hey, if it does happen though, we should praise them for it. They knew that people wanted to play this game as soon as possible, and they did not let us down. Another area of praise are the accessibility and game settings. You can customize the color for various game objects, alter certain mechanics like the lock-on ability, or remove gore. A couple standouts to me is the ability to make the item menu lock when pressing the button so you don't have to hold it, or making the game UI larger. Now, I would have liked the ability to turn off the yellow paint or further customize the enemy AI and placements, or other things I mentioned before where having those accessibility options would have been awesome. I kind of was expecting something like Doom the Dark Ages, but the settings here are satisfactory, and I did use the color change for certain objects and the traversal areas because those were kind of hard for me. In addition to changing controller layouts, you can also customize the button mapping as much as you like. an addition sorely lacking in previous games, and I'm so glad they put it into this one. We're pretty deep into the video to start talking about the core combat, the thing that people say is the best part of this game and justifies the game's other shortcomings. The reason why I chose to discuss this now is to emphasize the other important aspects of this game, something past games understood. Now to the combat. One of the new additions to this game is the Blood Raven techniques that transform Yakumo's weapons. This change gives you new range attacks, traversal options, and upgraded versions of the weapon skills, assuming you purchase them. The main use for this mechanic is to counter enemy heavy attacks and break enemies' guards. In fact, it's the only way you can do that, which can be frustrating and limiting at times. Thankfully, there are ways to mitigate this. What's brilliant about this new system is that even though they removed standard combos like forward light / heavy attacks or 360 UTs, they replaced it with combos that can be started through using other moves like Flying Swallow, which can lead to other insane strings, usually involving Blood Raven shenanigans. There's also more air juggling options that can be easily started with the heavy attacks, which can potentially be further enhanced with dynamic weapon switching, which thankfully isn't too game-breaking. Although I have seen some gameplay where in the right hands you can trivialize a lot of the combat. For most people, it just seems like a faster way to move from weapon to weapon. For me, I like that you don't have to integrate dynamic weapon switching in your combos to succeed in this game. It's just one of the many tools at your disposal. Speaking of having lots of options, the game has new defensive options. These are perfect block, perfect dodge, and parrying. Parrying is the most OP mechanic. Just like Steel on Bone, when timed properly, you can kill anything, especially since it triggers a Blood Raven attack. You can also easily follow up a perfect block or perfect dodge with an instant Blood Raven. Next, let's talk about the 4 weapons you get. Each one is great for different situations. The rapier is good for one-on-one fights, the staff is more for crowd control, the assassin tools are great for long-range enemies, and the dual blade is basically an all-purpose weapon like the dragon sword was in past iterations. Hence why people like it the most. I like how this game makes you spend a significant amount of time with each weapon before it gives you another, and each one might reuse the same weapon skill, button inputs, but the functionality is significantly different. Honestly, going through how all the weapons work and the different combinations could be a separate video to itself because of just how much depth there is. I mean, it's a lot of fun mixing it up with the different weapons. We also got the Dark Dragon Blade, the 5th weapon, the one they didn't tell us about, which you can unlock. It gives Yakumo reused gleam attacks and is no longer a heavy weapon like in original Ninja Gaiden. The weapon is fun to use, but the Ryu Gleam stuff I'm not the biggest fan of. Next, let's talk about the Rage Meter, which functions like Ninja Gaiden 3's Blood Rage Meter, except it isn't a UT that you gain. Instead, you can perform these instant kills using the Blood Raven attacks, either through a Bloodbath, which will kill a certain amount of enemies depending on the weapon, or a Bloodbath Slaughter, which wipes out everything but drains the meter faster. The mechanic works just like the Blood Rage Meter, where it will start going down if the battle ends or you aren't killing enough enemies. Essentially, you use it or you lose it. I don't think it gives you a karma multiplier like the Blood Rage Meter, but it does amplify your moves when active. And because of these restrictions, it's not game breaking. After the Rage Meter, let's talk about the enemy variety. So as I mentioned before, enemies in this game are aggressive, tanky, and plentiful. The variety seems to be good as well, with 23 different enemy types, which is technically less than Ninja Gaiden 3, but they do a better job at mixing up the enemy variety so it doesn't feel too stale. My only issue is that you can fight most of them the same way, aside from the large enemies and those annoying lanterns. The game has these zombie enemies which serve as the fodder enemies, reminding me of the terrorists, or those enemies in Doom Eternal. They help you charge your meter so you can take out the real enemies. I like how there's more larger enemies in this game compared to NG3. And while you can fight the Black Spider clan in the Ninja Trials, I wish they came back in the story. Same with other enemy types, besides the Vangels and the Shadow Fiends. By the way, the Vangels still feel wrong since they are from Ninja Gaiden 3, and now they even sound wrong for some reason. Like, how'd you mess that up? One thing that does kind of annoy me with the enemies is that the combat encounters can go on for way too long. Something I realized when doing a hero mode run to study the environments. It's crazy how these encounters feel reminiscent of Doom Eternal. I don't mind that in general, but the frequency is kind of annoying. You have to remember that the enemies are harder to kill than ever, and you don't have something like Steel on Bone, which can let you go through enemies a lot faster. Yes, you do have parry, but it's not as user-friendly as Steel on Bone is. So because in those past games you had better ways to kill the enemies, I didn't mind endless waves. And in 2 and 1, they didn't have tanky enemies, so again, if I'm fighting lots of them, it's not a big deal. Now maybe when I get good, it won't be as annoying, but right now, I don't want to experience the purgatory-like challenges or ninja trial stuff in almost every single enemy encounter. Now everyone keeps saying this is the best combat ever for a Ninja Gaiden game, and I can see that with all the new features. But no matter how much fun I had in this game, nothing can compete with the Kasari Gamma gameplay from Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge, or the Falcon Talons for that matter. There's just insane stuff in that game that made me want to fight endless waves of enemies that doesn't really exist in this one, at least so far. You could even discuss the tired defensive combat of original Ninja Gaiden or the more methodical combat in Ninja Gaiden 2. So making that statement is dumb because each game excelled in its area of combat and differs from one another because each one made changes from the next iteration, some good and some bad. I think they're all fun in their own right. If one the game had like terrible combat, I could see this argument having some validity, but that's not the case. The only real difference is that older games are obviously dated in certain mechanics compared to Ninja Gaiden 4, but that shouldn't be used to discredit those games. What I can agree with is that Ninja Gaiden 4 has the most features and options for players for combat encounters compared to past iterations. But that in and of itself doesn't mean it's the best combat Ninja Gaiden has ever had. Let's talk about the boss fights in this game. In my opinion, they're a mixed bag. On one hand, they feel less cheap than ones in past games. On the other hand, while you seemingly have more options, you also feel like you have less options to fight them. I say this because while you can use most of your moves against them, most of those moves don't work if they armor up, which forces you to use the Blood Raven techniques. And if you use the parry system, that can trivialize all the boss fights, even more than Steel on Bone did in Ninja Gaiden 3. In fact, it feels like these boss fights were designed specifically so you can parry spam them and kill them. Because of this, the bosses don't challenge me in the same way that past ones did. Another reason for this is that in past bosses, you couldn't use the same tactics that you used for enemies. UTs were not really a valid option, and certain strings were harder to pull off. As a result, you had to play differently. Not always for the better, by the way. I kind of missed that stuff here. In my first playthrough, only the dog Tengu thing, Kagachi, and Ryu forced me to play differently. However, once I get better at parries, something tells me that's going to change as well. Now, let's be clear, the fights are still challenging, just not like in past games. I will definitely take these over the plain T-Rex and Gigadeath, even though the dog boss was really annoying. I also don't like how the bosses are too formulaic. Each one has 2 phases based on how many health bars you've removed. Now, the phases themselves are really cool though. Besides the consistent health bar, you also fight each boss in a large area. Only the statue and the dark dragon played around with the environment, which can also be an obstacle. The other ones don't. At least there's 2 rounds with the Fox Daemon Lady. The variety in the environments for the boss fights was a strength in the past games. Also, the major boss fights to break the seals don't have much setup for them, like the Greater Fiends in Ninja Gaiden 2, or the Region, Genshin, Alma, Doku, Morai, or the Imperfect Goddess. That kinda kills the fun of the battle, and it's another failing in the story department. At least they had something for Ryu, Kagachi, the Shark, and the Dark Dragon. The designs for the bosses are excellent, although nothing competes with Espinal when it comes to fun from Ninja Gaiden 3. But Ryu, Kagashi, and the Dark Dragon are all fun boss fights. So at their worst, the boss fights just aren't memorable, but at least nothing here is broken or Goddess Kana levels of bad. The only thing I didn't like was the Dog Tengu boss. I was kind of confused what to do during the second phase. I think that was really more of a skill issue. Now to other stuff, like the UI, another mixed bag. Now in case you guys didn't know, my favorite colors are red and black, but just because I like those colors, I don't think that should have been the color scheme for this UI. Having red text can sometimes be unreadable. Besides the color scheme, the menus themselves are fast, easy to get through, and it doesn't take too many clicks to go to any particular thing you want to look at. I don't like that hitting start takes you to the equipment menu instead of options, but at least you can map the select button to go to options. But these are nitpicks. The real problem is the UI during combat, because it's awful. I thought it was fine from the gameplay footage, but that changed after playing the game. God, where to begin? Why is the blood bind / key meter in the bottom left corner instead of being directly under the health meter? The same question applies to the rage meter and the dynamic weapon switching menu. All of that should have been by the health meter. This is because most people look at the top left corner of an interface. You probably notice that most interfaces on websites and software work that way. This is human computer interaction 101, and yet these people fucked it up. The only thing that should be in bottom corners is a mini-map or the money you have, which makes sense because those are things you don't need to look at all the time. Ninja Gaiden 3, a game that everyone seems to hate for understandable reasons, at least didn't mess this up. The key meter was directly under the health meter, so you never had to look anywhere else. And it wouldn't be clunky to have that stuff directly under the health meter because Ninja Gaiden 2 had a larger health meter than this one and included your Ninpo stocks and what Ninpo was equipped. So there's plenty of space there, and if necessary, they can make the blood bind / key meter thinner. Here's what it would look like in practice. This isn't a nitpick either, because having crucial information in two spots forces the player to constantly have to look at two separate areas instead of one. This leads to players being unable to focus on both things at the same time, something they also messed up with training mode. I have seen many streams of this game where people lose track of the blood rage meter, probably for this reason. Considering how there's so much stuff in this game that it can be overstimulating at times, maybe not spreading out the UI for no reason would have made this a lot easier on people. For a game that prides itself on having accessibility options, you don't have one to move the meters together. You can just make them larger, which isn't good enough. Next comes the health meter. When I first played this game, I thought you didn't have regenerative health. Instead, the game was copying the original Ninja Gaiden's health system. I stupidly should have gone through the training on it, so admittedly, my bad. But in past games, I didn't need a tutorial to know this because it was obvious in gameplay. Ninja Gaiden 2 used blue for your health and red for permanent damage. Ninja Gaiden 3 simply shrunk the meter to reflect how much you had left. This game just shows you how much you have left without changing the size of the meter or having some visual to show the permanent damage. Is this a major problem? No, but again, it's a simple UI issue that could have been easily avoided. For God's sakes, they shrink the meter in Purgatory after you weighed your health. So why couldn't they just do that here in every other case? Sometimes I still got confused and thought the meter should still refill since the permanent damage isn't shown as well compared to past games. I just don't like the way it showcases this. And if you combine the thing I said earlier about how the two meters are not near each other, it's very easy to lose track of one thing or another. And on top of that, the health meter has a boring design and color scheme. Ninja Gaiden 3 had more personality than this shit, and that was a simple white bar and black background. Next, the tutorial buttons. Again, how do you mess up something so simple? We already had an established template with Ninja Gaiden 3 and Ninja Gaiden 2. They had the tutorial buttons in the center bottom of the screen with nice large buttons that even highlighted when you did the right input. Here, it's in the left of the screen with smaller text. The entire point of the tutorial stuff is to help players learn the controls. So why would you move it to a non-central location, especially in between the health and the key meter? There is simply no way a player can look at all three at the same time. I swear, did these people actually play the past games? Because a lot of the fundamental stuff here was lost in translation. I wasn't sure where to put this stuff, so here's a quick list of even more things I disliked in this game. Here we go. You don't kick open doors like in past games. In fact, you don't interact with doors at all, aside from when Yakumo breaks select DDO doors and the Tengu statues. For some reason, Yakumo is even shorter than doors, which is weird. Health upgrades aren't optional, which was only a thing in Sigma 2. How did the leads not remember that? This change pissed people off. You don't kick chests like in Ninja Gaiden 2. Purgatory awards this time around don't feel worth it compared to past games. It should have awarded a rare item and money, like what Ninja Gaiden 2 did. Ninja Gaiden 3 gave you money because it had no items, but the money award was extremely worth it. Also, the Purgatory missions all take place in the same location instead of past games where you were either transported to a new area or past arenas like in Ninja Gaiden 3. The same small dark area got old real quick. Why couldn't they use the custom arenas they made for Ninja Trials? How does Ninja Gaiden 3's lazy reuse of combat arenas from past games feel more fresh than this? They got rid of the end of battle score, which was a great feature from Ninja Gaiden 3. The missions are fine, but I don't quite understand why you need to accept them. There's no consequence of not completing the missions, so why not just automatically assign them to you? It seems like an unnecessary step that only exists to, prolong the game, add filler? I have no idea. I would be okay with accepting missions if you got them from characters in person and not from a UI screen. Also, some of the missions are locked to a specific area, but this isn't original Ninja Gaiden where there's a hub world where you go to and from different areas. So once you finish a location, you can't go back to it. That is, unless you go to the chapter challenges. I wish this game did have a hub world where each area was connected via the rail, gliding, or surfing mechanics. Then the missions could have been fleshed out. As it stands, it feels lazy and half-baked, but at least it's not offensive. Because Yakumo moves so fast, and certain areas are too small, it's easy to fall off the platform. I never had this problem in past games because it wasn't a thing. I'm not sure why they introduced it. The camera almost made me throw up the first time I played the game when I was on the train. Thankfully, it's fully customizable, but even then, sometimes it'll give you a random bird's eye view of stuff, which can just be really annoying. You can't adjust the camera during combat like you could in past games. You can only spin the camera, there's no snap function, and the camera isn't dramatically better either. In some cases, it feels worse, especially in small spaces, where it fails like always. Sometimes I legitimately cannot tell what's going on, and enemies can disappear too depending on the camera angle. The only reason why the camera seems better is because the environments are larger. That's it. Moving on, it's much harder in this game to know when enemies have delimbed arms since they don't act differently enough compared to past games, where they dramatically slow down. But here, they don't. it's only easy to tell when the enemy has lost a leg for obvious reasons. I missed the simple item menu from past games where it paused the action to allow you to switch weapons or use items or something else, but here it only slows things down. The soundtrack is passable, the rock music is okay except for the singing. When that happens, I have to turn it off because it's distracting. I don't think rock music works well in these games, but I can usually tune it out. Another annoying thing: no unlockable costumes, a staple in every other game. Instead, they're locked behind in-game purchases with actual money. In fact, besides the achievement, what is your reward for being Master Ninja? Why not give us a golden Ryu and Yakumo outfit? You guys liked Ninja Gaiden 2 so much, so what happened? Another annoying thing is that sometimes the game will drop inputs. Normally it's not a big deal, but it is when you're trying to do the traversal sections and certain combat encounters. I really don't understand the glazing of this game. Now, to be fair, there's also a bunch of stuff I really liked, and I didn't know where to place it, so let's go through all of those things. The DDO designs are awesome. They're these cool cyber samurais. I like the infighting between the DDO and the daemons. I just wish we saw more of that. It was nothing like in Halo 2. Of course, the daemon designs are also awesome. I really like Yakumo's Blood Raven forms in terms of the animation, and I'm also really impressed how they brilliantly integrated it into the normal combat system of Ninja Gaiden. Same with Ryu's gleam attacks. When it mattered in combat, the team delivered. I just wish they applied that passion in other areas. Collecting Gordies is the only QTE stuff in the game. Thank God. I hated that crap in Ninja Gaiden 3. I like how you can change the item menu and the Blood Raven to either be a hold or tap activation and deactivation. I like how it copies original Ninja Gaiden, where you unlock all the features after completing the game once, which includes the trials, purgatory challenges, and chapter challenges. There are even new items you can now get in the campaign if you go through it again, which makes New Game Plus worth doing. I like that you can make the main menu have two different looks, and it can change according to your costume and even the color settings. It's too bad you can't set the show Ryu though. I already discussed the weapons, but in particular, I like the assassin tools, like everything about it. I like how the different weapons were unlocked by the different moves you purchased, which is what I predicted. The long range and short range attacks are just awesome. The ninja trials are awesome. I just wish the conditions were optional and it just followed Ninja Gaiden 3's and added survival mode. But better than nothing, I guess. I like the return of classic items and some new additions, same with Blood Essence and the store. These things were sorely needed in the last game. Also, I don't mind that the store auto heals you every time you interact with it. It didn't ruin the experience, it just took some time getting used to it. I do miss the save statues or even the save falcons. The checkpoints are fine, I just wish there was some in between the boss phases and some indication you got one. You also have infinite save slots, which is awesome compared to past games that significantly limited you for whatever reason. I like that chests will have a different color for missions to help indicate the player that the item you're looking for is in here. And there will definitely be more things that I'll discover that I like about this game through doing future playthroughs. So now that we've gone through every aspect of this game, the question becomes, does this game play like a traditional Ninja Gaiden game? I spent a lot of time thinking about this, hence why this review took so long to make. Just from the discourse online, I have seen good arguments from both sides, which leads me to believe that this is purely a subjective thing. It just depends on your definition of what Ninja Gaiden is. Purists will say Ninja Gaiden Black is the only true Ninja Gaiden experience, or Ninja Gaiden 2 in the same respect. Some longtime fans don't care, new fans don't know the difference, and you got everything in between. It simply comes down to this. How many changes are you willing to tolerate in your Ninja Gaiden game before it no longer resembles a Ninja Gaiden game? Now, of course, you didn't come here to listen to a fence sitter, so here's my answer to that question. Ryu segments feel like Ninja Gaiden, mostly because you can ignore the gleam attacks and other new stuff and just focus on Nimpo and basic combo strings. The game doesn't force you to change up your tactics from past games. But again, this is just about the combat. By contrast, Yakumo segments do not feel like Ninja Gaiden. The combat is too flashy, blurry, and too fast. Sometimes I can't follow what's happening as I play through the combat. Sometimes it feels like the game is playing itself. Original Ninja Gaiden was more clear and slower paced, so the combat was easier to follow. Even Yakumo's movements feel off to me, and I noticed this when I was playing the game for the first time. The new mechanics like parry feel too much like modern action games and less like Ninja Gaiden. And no, saying that, well, we had a counter system in past games, therefore we can have this mechanic, doesn't work because those things are dramatically different and you know that. Then you got the traversal stuff. Again, this doesn't feel like a Ninja Gaiden thing. I don't see how you can state as a lead of this game that we are going against modern trends when this is exactly what I would expect a modern action game to be like. The bottom line is this. I don't care if my gripes are due to Platinum Games or modern Team Ninja. I don't care if Neo is going in this direction. This isn't a Neo game. We are talking about the vision of the past versus the vision now, and I don't think they align. If you change the system for how combos worked, remove key components, and add things that go against the philosophy of this IP, how can you call it a Ninja Gaiden game? It feels more like a new IP that had the permission to use some of Ninja Gaiden's past moves. There might not be a definitive Ninja Gaiden game, but there is a definitive formula. A formula that only exists in this game on a surface level, and works differently because of the change in direction. Now back to Yakumo for a second, I noticed that his weapons and himself don't have the same weight as Ryu in past games. You can seemingly travel insane distances with dashing and UTs. And also, Yakumo chucking guys in the air with the guillotine throw just looks stupid sometimes. And for some reason, and this applies to Ryu, the blade cutting sounds don't sound like blades. It sounds like you're mashing something. The art style is off at times as well, like how the blood looks fake and jelly-like, considering how past games made sure the blood looked authentic, but still artsy. But here, it just looks awful. I'm not sure what they were going for. I mean, who cares if there's tons of blood if the blood looks awful, right? In general, everything in this game just feels messy and imprecise. The UI philosophy, bosses, story mode, and environments don't feel like Ninja Gaiden. It lacks the gravitas and polish we've come to expect from past games. At least the surface level stuff works well enough. So right now, it does not feel like a Ninja Gaiden game, but it is a fun game in its own right. When I first heard that Platinum Games was going to work with Team Ninja, I thought this would be a perfect pairing based on Platinum Games' reputation. But then as the news came out, the problems were starting to come out. And on top of this, IGN said this was a brand new team, and boy did it show. This game is a mess. And I mean that from a combat standpoint and a design standpoint. Strange decisions. Priorities focused on the wrong things. These guys got so lost in the sauce, and as a result, they disrespected this IP, whether it was intentional or not. There was also mass deception from the leads and from the press who weren't upfront with certain things. I felt lied to after going through my first playthrough of this game. At the end of the day, this isn't what I wanted in a new Ninja Gaiden game. While I'm having fun with it, I don't want future games to emulate this. If you've gotten this far and don't care about any of my complaints, then just give this game a 10 out of 10 and move on. Make sure to let the leads know that combat is all that matters in this IP, even though that's never been the case. And I know this isn't true because if Ninja Gaiden 4 was just Ninja Trials, people would be upset. So don't like me with that garbage. In my case, having great combat doesn't matter enough if everything else is a mix of decent to bad. So I'm going to generously give this game a 7 out of 10, even though I think it really deserves a 6.5 out of 10. I wouldn't recommend buying this now, wait for a sale, and definitely wait for the DLC. I don't know what is so difficult about making a good game in this franchise. It doesn't seem to matter how much time passes. Lessons are never learned, notes are not taken, and in this case, they had so much time to revisit everything and make it all right with this new title, and they ultimately just repeated the same errors while making new ones. Ninja Gaiden fans deserve better than this.